She moved through the torch-lit corridors like a shadow wrapped in silk, her bare feet whispering across cold marble. Behind every door, a different man waited. Soldiers, nobles, gladiators, even slaves. Summoned not by desire, but by a command whispered from the Empress herself. By dawn, many would be unable to stand. Some might not survive the night at all. And at the center of the storm, Messalina, Rome's most feared, most desired, most unstoppable woman, smiled as if nothing could ever touch her. Valeria Messalina entered history like a spark tossed into dry fields, small, almost unnoticeable at first, until the fire began to crawl outward and consume everything in its reach. Born into one of Rome's oldest and most prestigious families, she was raised surrounded by marble, wealth, political ambition, and the subtle, simmering violence of imperial power. From childhood, she learned the two skills that mattered in the palace: to observe and to strike only when the strike would matter. Even before she became the wife of Claudius, Messalina carried the kind of beauty Roman poets struggled to describe without trembling. It was not the fragile loveliness of a painted statue. Hers was something alive, something dangerous, the beauty of a goddess who had grown bored with being worshipped and wanted to see what mortals looked like when they broke. Men whispered about her even before she came of age. Women whispered louder. By the time she married Claudius, awkward, limping Claudius, the uncle who became emperor almost by accident, Messalina had already begun weaving her own invisible empire. The marriage was not a cage, it was a throne. Claudius adored her, trusted her, leaned on her. She smiled sweetly beside him at ceremonies, her eyes soft, her hands folded. And then, when he retired to his books or feasts or political duties, she slipped into the underbelly of Rome and shaped it as if it were clay. She discovered early that power in Rome did not rest solely in the Senate, the Praetorian Guard, or even the emperor. Power lived in appetites, hungers, cravings, weaknesses. And Messalina, who understood human desire with terrifying precision, learned to pull those threads one by one. Senators who opposed her found their careers collapsing under anonymous accusations. Wealthy nobles found themselves blackmailed with secrets they never realized she had noticed. And the men who believed they possessed her soon learned that no one possessed Messalina. Her nights grew infamous among those who dared speak of them. She would slip out of the palace, dressed not like an empress, but like one of Rome's street courtesans, her face hidden beneath a veil, her laughter echoing through smoky taverns and private chambers. No one knew how she managed it, how she evaded the guards, the spies, the servants, but they all knew why. Rumor claimed she sought not pleasure, but domination. She would take a lover, break him, dismiss him, and return to the palace before dawn, with the serene expression of a woman who had slept through the night. But even her most hostile critics could not imagine the scale of what she was capable of. That revelation came one notorious evening, the night she challenged Rome's most experienced courtesan, Sylla, to a competition that should have been a joke, a drunken boast, a whispered fantasy. Instead, it became a legend carved into the bones of Roman gossip. The challenge was simple, brutal, and utterly insane. Who could take more men in a single night? Courtesans laughed, gladiators bet fortunes, and powerful men who should have known better waited like wolves circling a fresh kill. Scylla arrived confident, glamorous, accustomed to winning every contest of endurance and seduction. Messalina arrived dressed like a goddess of vice, every step radiating danger. The men chosen for the contest stood trembling, not with fear, but with anticipation. None understood what they were about to witness. Messalina's eyes burned with a strange, fierce delight. She was no longer an empress. She was a force of nature, an unstoppable storm that fed on the very limits of mortal flesh. And the night began. The hall chosen for the contest was one of Rome's secret pleasure houses, lavish, dangerous, known only to the wealthy and the depraved. Velvet curtains shivered as warm lamplight flickered across the marble floor, illuminating the faces of the chosen men. Some were soldiers, hardened and eager. Others were young nobles with trembling hands. A few were slaves sent by masters who wanted the honor of participating or the thrill of telling the story later. All of them looked at Messalina with awe and a kind of terror. Scylla took her place first, reclining on a couch draped with red silk, confident in her reputation. She beckoned the first man forward with a practiced smile. As he approached, she shot Messalina a triumphant smirk, as if to say, "You may be an empress, but this arena belongs to me." Messalina did not smirk back. She only stood, the lamplight bending around her like worship. Her hair fell loose down her shoulders, her eyes bright with an intensity that made even the most confident men hesitate. When she stepped forward to choose her first partner, the room fell silent, as if the city itself had paused to witness the beginning. By the first hour, Scylla's rhythm was confident, steady, professional. She paced herself, rested between partners, drank wine to maintain her composure. She was winning, but not dramatically so, just enough to keep the audience entertained. Messalina, however, was something else entirely. She moved with tireless precision, as if she had discovered a frequency of the body that allowed her to conserve energy even as she pushed herself upward, faster, deeper into the rhythm of the competition. Her expression never wavered, her composure never cracked. Some claimed her breathing barely changed. Others swore her eyes darkened with a kind of ecstatic focus that made it impossible to look away. By the third hour, whispers began. "She's not human," one noble muttered. "She'll collapse," a soldier insisted. "Or kill someone," another replied. But Messalina did not collapse. She did not slow. She did not even appear fatigued. Instead, she reached for the next man with the calm assurance of a queen selecting a servant to perform a trivial duty. And they obeyed her, not because of the contest, not because of the rules, but because something in her presence demanded surrender. Scylla, once confident, began to falter. Her movements grew sluggish, her breath ragged. Sweat coated her skin, her hair clinging to her cheeks. She tried to keep pace, pushed herself until her hands trembled, but the gap widened relentlessly. By midnight, she was begging silently for it to end. A servant offered her wine, but it slipped from her shaking fingers. Messalina noticed the moment Scylla broke. Her gaze slid across the room, found the courtesan's trembling form, and lingered with a softness that was almost pity. Almost. Then she turned back to her next partner without a word and continued with renewed intensity, as if consuming Scylla's surrender like fuel. At dawn, Scylla collapsed, unable to take another breath or lift her head. Her final count was impressive, 49 men, more than most could dream of surviving. In any ordinary story, she would have been declared a legend, but Messalina was finishing her 86th. The men were exhausted, staggering, half-conscious. Some had already fainted, others knelt on the floor praying for strength. Messalina paced among them, urging the last few forward with the serene authority of a goddess demanding worship. Her body moved with hypnotic certainty, each motion deliberate, practiced, relentless. The final hour felt like a fever dream. No one spoke, No one moved except the participants. The audience watched in reverent silence, understanding that they were witnessing something Rome would never forget, a moment that defied reason, morality, and the limits of the human body. When Messalina reached her 100th partner, the room held its breath. 30 men stood watching, others collapsed around them, and still she showed no sign of breaking. She finished with the same calm focus with which she had begun. Then she stood, her skin glowing with sweat and oil, her chest rising and falling in steady, controlled breaths. She looked like a sculpture come to life, flawless, divine, terrifying. The room erupted. Some cheered, some cried, some fled as if fearing divine punishment for witnessing such a scene. And Messalina, still conscious enough to understand what she had lost, whispered through tears, "She will destroy us all." Messalina simply wrapped herself in a thin robe, brushed her hair back, and strode into the morning light as if she had merely completed a pleasant evening's entertainment. For her, the contest had not been about pleasure or pride. It had been a demonstration, a warning to anyone who thought they understood the Empress. The whispers began spreading through Rome before she even returned to the palace. By midday, the entire city was alive with the rumor. Messalina had conquered 100 men in one night. But no one agreed on the meaning behind it. Some thought it proved her supernatural strength. Others believed it was a political message, a symbol that she was the true power behind Claudius, not the emperor himself. And a few, those who knew Messalina best, understood the truth. She was testing the boundaries of fear, and Rome was beginning to tremble.
But while the rumor electrified the streets, the palace seethed with dread. The senators were the first to panic. If Messalina could humiliate a legendary courtesan, if she could withstand a night that would have killed lesser women, what else was she capable of? A woman with no limits was far more frightening than a tyrant, because tyrants followed rules, even if twisted ones. Messalina followed none. Her appetites, political or physical, operated on instinct, hunger, and a fearless sense of entitlement. Claudius, ever oblivious, praised her beauty at dinner that night, remarking how radiant she looked. The emperor was blind to the whispers, deaf to warnings, and unshakably convinced that his young wife was the embodiment of modesty and loyalty. He stroked her hand with affectionate pride, unaware of what the entire city now knew. But the freedmen, Narcissus, Pallas, Callistus, were not blind. They watched Messalina during the banquet with the alertness of men studying a predator. Her calmness frightened them more than any rumor. She ate delicately, drank little, and responded to Claudius with soft, measured smiles. There was not a single twitch of guilt or fear. It was as if the scandal nourished her. The night after her infamous contest, she slipped away again, this time to a private villa owned by a poet who worshipped her like a living deity. He had composed elegies comparing her to Venus, and while the verses were embarrassingly bad, Messalina enjoyed the devotion. She enjoyed the sensation of walking into a room and watching men kneel, not because she demanded it, but because they could not stop themselves. She reclined on a couch while the poet read aloud, trembling with reverence. When he finished, he collapsed at her feet, begging to be allowed to kiss the hem of her robe. She permitted it, not out of kindness, but because his worship fed something inside her, a growing certainty that she was beyond the reach of law or fate. But even devotion had its limits, and Messalina pushed them all. Her affairs multiplied. Soldiers, gladiators, actors, nobles, slaves. She collected them like one collects jewels. Some lasted weeks, some only hours. Many returned again and again despite the danger. They knew she was unpredictable. They knew she might discard them, expose them, or use them against their own families. But Messalina wielded seduction like a weapon, and her victims always returned willingly, as if addicted. The only man she kept consistently was Gaius Silius, handsome, ambitious, and foolishly convinced he could control her. She liked him because he believed himself her equal. She liked him even more because he wasn't. Their meetings were not hidden. Silius walked openly into the palace. He touched her arm in public. He accepted gifts from her, land, property, gold, that no lover of an empress should ever accept. The senators watched with growing horror, realizing what Messalina was doing. She wasn't just cheating, she was replacing Claudius. Rumors intensified. Silius whispered that they could marry, that he could rule in Claudius's place, that the emperor's passivity was an insult to Rome. Messalina listened, her expression unreadable. Did she intend to overthrow her husband? Or did she simply enjoy the thrill of being adored by a man reckless enough to dream of crowns? No one knew, not even Silius. But danger grew like poison in the walls. One afternoon, Messalina and Silius hosted a banquet in his villa when Claudius was away inspecting Ostia. Slaves poured wine into silver cups while musicians played soft, seductive notes. Guests watched the pair with alarmed fascination. Messalina sat on Silius's lap, her head resting on his shoulder, her fingers tracing idle patterns on his chest. A senator approached her cautiously. "This is dangerous," he whispered. "All of Rome is speaking. Even the Praetorians know." Messalina smiled, a slow, chilling smile that silenced him. It does not matter what Rome knows. What matters is what Rome fears. The senator opened his mouth to respond, but she raised a finger and he fell silent. Her calmness was more terrifying than any outburst. She acted as if fate were a tame creature resting at her feet. But fate never rests for long. Outside the villa, Narcissus was already gathering evidence. He spoke to guards, bribed slaves, collected testimonies that painted an increasingly vivid picture of treason. He knew Claudius trusted Messalina too deeply to see the truth. So Narcissus began preparing the one thing that might save Rome from disaster. A moment of undeniable exposure, something even Claudius could not excuse. Inside the villa, Messalina danced barefoot on polished marble, while guests watched her with the mix of dread and admiration she inspired in everyone. Silius watched her with devotion, believing he had already claimed his future. But Messalina felt it, that faint tremor in the air, like the distant rumble before a storm breaks. It excited her, the thrill of danger, the sense of being one step from ruin and one step from absolute triumph. Few people in history have been so fearless. Fewer still have survived it.
Messalina awoke each morning as if reborn, emerging from the suffocating darkness of Rome's whispered judgment with the same burning hunger she could never extinguish. But as autumn settled upon the city, the whispers grew louder, more venomous, and more dangerous. Her enemies no longer hid in shadows. They stood in doorways, on marble steps, in the Senate's cold corridors. Rome smelled blood, and Messalina, for the first time, smelled fear. Yet she refused to retreat. She stood before her mirror, servants placing fresh pearls in her braided hair, and she smiled at her reflection. They want a monster? Then let them choke on one. But monsters rarely died quietly, and Rome had already decided it wanted hers to die loudly.
When the final scandal erupted, it did so with the force of a collapsing temple. The rumors had always been wild, but this one was apocalyptic. Messalina had secretly married Gaius Silius, the most handsome nobleman in Rome, while still married to the emperor. Not only married, celebrated the union with a drunken festival across the gardens, attended by senators who thought themselves untouchable. It was treason cloaked as pleasure, rebellion disguised as indulgence. Claudius heard the news as he sat down to eat. A single trembling slave whispered it into his ear, and the emperor froze with a cup halfway to his lips. For a moment he didn't speak, not because he didn't believe it, but because he did. It matched every fear he had buried since the day he married her. Messalina sensed the shift in the city long before soldiers reached her. The air felt different, colder, heavier, pulsing with the dread she had always outrun. When the news arrived, carried by a breathless servant who nearly collapsed at her feet, she felt the world jolt beneath her. "The Emperor knows." The words struck like a blade. She ran, not as an empress, not as Rome's most desired woman, but as a terrified human being whose empire of pleasure was collapsing behind her. She fled barefoot across her gardens, pearls falling from her hair, silk tearing on branches. Her breath burned, her heart hammered, and for the first time in her life, the night did not welcome her. She reached the Via Nomentana, dust covering her feet, and found the one shelter she believed still hers, the villa of her mother, Lepida. It was a desperate gamble. They had not spoken in months. They had fought bitterly, violently, viciously. Messalina had screamed at her, cursed her, pushed her away. Yet now she collapsed into her mother's arms like a frightened child. Lepida, who had suffered under her daughter's cruelty, felt something break inside her. A final fragment of maternal love she had sworn no longer existed. She held Messalina close, stroked her hair, and whispered, "My daughter, you must be brave now." Outside the villa, the sound of hooves thundered closer. Narcissus, Claudius's most cunning freedman, had taken command. He did not want her trial. He wanted her death. She was too dangerous alive, too beautiful, too persuasive, too skilled at bending men to her will. Even in chains, she could still unravel Rome. Inside the villa garden, Messalina felt the tremor of earth beneath boots and horses. She knew what it meant. She pulled away from her mother and stood, trembling, but her chin lifted with a faint echo of her old defiance. "I will speak to him. He still loves me." Her mother's eyes filled with tears, not of hope, but pity. "My child, Claudius is not coming." The soldiers entered. The tribune stepped forward, hesitant, almost regretful, for even hardened soldiers feared the woman whose beauty had destroyed half of Rome. He offered her a chance. "Take your own life. It will be quicker." Messalina took the dagger. Her hands shook. She tried once, failed. Tried again, couldn't. The woman who had conquered every bedroom in the empire could not conquer the final inch of steel between life and death. And last the tribune stepped behind her and lifted his blade and ended her story. Silence fell upon the garden. Lepida crumpled to the ground, clutching her daughter's lifeless body, sobbing into the dust. And Messalina, Rome's wildest flame, burned out not in a blaze of passion, but in a quiet corner beneath fading autumn light. When the news reached Claudius, he simply whispered, "I did not command it," and then he continued to eat as if nothing had happened. But Rome remembered. Not the emperor, not the judgment, not the execution. Rome remembered the woman who lived faster, burned brighter, and fell harder than any soul who dared tempt the empire's appetite for destruction. Messalina, the woman whose desire became legend. The empress who outran everyone except herself.